They say Julius Caesar cried in front of Alexander's statue because at the same age, Alexander had already conquered most of the known world. He was only 32 years old. No guns, no modern technology, no massive empire behind him in the beginning. Yet one man marched across deserts, climbed deadly mountains, defeated kings twice his size, and created one of the greatest empires in human history. But here's the real question. Was Alexander truly a hero? Or was he a man who became addicted to conquest? This is the story of Alexander the Great. In 356 BC, in the ancient kingdom of Macedon, a boy was born who would one day shake the entire world. His name was Alexander. His father was King Philip II, a brilliant warrior who transformed Macedon into a military power. His mother, Olympias, believed her son was chosen by the gods. From childhood, Alexander was told he was destined for greatness, and maybe he believed it. As a young boy, Alexander was different from others. He was fearless, intelligent, and dangerously ambitious. One story from his childhood became legendary. A wild horse named Bucephalus was brought before the king. Nobody could control it. The horse kicked, screamed, and threw every rider to the ground. But young Alexander noticed something. The horse was afraid of its own shadow. So he slowly turned the horse toward the sun, climbed onto it, and rode away. The crowd stood silent. His father looked at him and said, "My son, Macedonia is too small for you." That moment became a symbol of Alexander's future. He was not born to stay small. Alexander was educated by one of the greatest philosophers in history. Aristotle taught him science, medicine, philosophy, politics, and literature. But Alexander loved one story more than any other. The tale of Achilles from the Trojan War. He admired Achilles so deeply that he carried a copy of the Iliad wherever he went. To Alexander, glory mattered more than comfort, more than peace, maybe even more than life itself. At just 16 years old, Alexander was already leading armies, and by the age of 20, his entire life changed. His father, King Philip II, was assassinated. Suddenly, Alexander became king, but many people believed he was too young, too inexperienced, too weak to rule. That was their first mistake. Several Greek cities immediately rebelled against him. Alexander responded with terrifying speed. He marched toward the city of Thebes and destroyed it so completely that the rest of Greece surrendered without another major rebellion. The message was clear. Alexander was not a child king. He was a conqueror, but Alexander did not dream of ruling only Greece. He wanted something much bigger, the Persian Empire. Its king, Darius III, ruled lands stretching from Egypt to India. Most people thought defeating Persia was impossible. Alexander disagreed. In 334 BC, he crossed into Asia with around 40,000 soldiers. Many believed it was suicide, but Alexander moved with unbelievable confidence. At the Battle of Granicus, he defeated Persian forces for the first time. Then came one of the most important battles of his life, the Battle of Issus. There, Alexander faced King Darius III himself. The Persian army was enormous. Some historians believe it heavily outnumbered Alexander's forces, but Alexander used speed, discipline, and fearless attacks to break the Persian lines. Darius panicked, and then the king of Persia ran from the battlefield. For Alexander's soldiers, it felt impossible. The ruler of the largest empire in the world had fled before them. After Issus, many cities surrendered, but one city refused, Tyre. The city stood on an island surrounded by massive walls. It looked impossible to capture. Alexander spent months building a giant causeway across the sea just to reach the city walls. His men worked under attack day and night. Finally, Tyre fell. It was one of the greatest siege victories of the ancient world. and it revealed something dangerous about Alexander. He never accepted failure, ever. Next, Alexander entered Egypt, and unlike other places, he was welcomed as a liberator. In Egypt, he founded a city that still exists today, Alexandria, a city that would later become one of the greatest centers of learning in human history. Then came a strange moment that changed Alexander forever. He traveled through the desert to visit the Oracle of Amun. Nobody knows exactly what was said there, but after returning, Alexander increasingly believed he was not just a king. He believed he was divine, part human, part god. And from that point onward, his ambition became limitless. In 331 BC, Alexander faced Darius one final time. The Battle of Gaugamela. This battle would decide the fate of the world. Darius gathered one of the largest armies ever seen in ancient history. War chariots, cavalry, thousands upon thousands of soldiers. Alexander's army was far smaller, but his strategy was brilliant. At the perfect moment, he spotted a tiny opening in the Persian line, and he charged directly toward Darius. Once again, Darius fled, and with that single moment, the Persian Empire collapsed. Alexander became ruler of the greatest empire on earth. Babylon, Persia, Egypt, all belonged to him now. Most kings would have stopped there. Alexander didn't. The more he conquered, the more obsessed he became. He pushed deeper into Central Asia, across brutal deserts, frozen mountains, and unknown lands. His soldiers were exhausted, far from home. Many had been fighting for almost 10 years, but Alexander kept moving forward. He even adopted Persian clothing and customs. Some of his own men hated this. They believed Alexander was changing, and honestly, power was transforming him.
Then came one of the darkest moments of his life. During a drunken argument, Alexander killed one of his closest friends, Platus the Black. The same man who had once saved Alexander's life in battle. The moment his anger faded, Alexander was horrified.
Alexander!
He locked himself away in grief, but the damage was done. The young hero who once inspired loyalty was becoming feared. Still, Alexander marched onward, toward India. In 326 BC, he fought King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes River. For the first time, Alexander's army faced war elephants, massive creatures crashing through the battlefield. The battle was brutal. Rain poured from the sky. Men screamed beneath elephant feet. But once again, Alexander won. After the battle, he asked the captured King Porus, "How do you wish to be treated?" Porus replied, "Like a king." Alexander smiled and allowed Porus to remain a ruler under his empire. It was one of the rare moments when genuine respect existed between two powerful enemies. But by now, Alexander's soldiers had reached their limit. They had marched thousands of miles, fought endless wars, buried countless friends. When Alexander wanted to continue deeper into India, his own army refused. For the first time in years, Alexander could not conquer the will of his own men, and so he turned back. Not because he wanted to, but because even legends cannot march alone. The journey home was a nightmare. Many soldiers died crossing the deadly Gedrosian desert. Heat, starvation, exhaustion. Alexander suffered alongside his men, but the dream was beginning to break apart. Years of war had changed everything, including him. Then, in 323 BC, inside the city of Babylon, Alexander suddenly became ill. At first, it seemed like a fever, but day by day he grew weaker. Soon, the man who had conquered nations could no longer even speak. His soldiers quietly walked past his bed one final time. Their unstoppable king was dying.
And then, at only 32 years old, Alexander the Great was gone. The cause of his death remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Some believe it was disease, others believe it was poisoning. Nobody knows for certain. But what happened after his death was chaos. because Alexander left behind no clear successor. His generals began fighting one another for power, and the empire he built started breaking apart almost immediately. But even though his empire collapsed, his influence never disappeared. Greek culture spread across Egypt, Persia, and Asia. New cities were built, trade expanded, ideas traveled farther than ever before. For centuries, rulers tried to imitate Alexander, from Roman emperors to Napoleon. Even today, more than 2,000 years later, the name Alexander still means conquest, still means ambition, still means greatness. But perhaps the most fascinating part of Alexander's story is this: he conquered almost the entire known world. Yet, in the end, he could not defeat time. He could not defeat death. And perhaps that is why his story still feels so human, because behind all the victories, behind the legend, was a man endlessly chasing something he could never fully reach: immortality. And somehow, he found it anyway, because the world still remembers his name, Alexander the Great.